So in preparation for Tony and Tess's next visit here to Ohio, I have a little project I want to try and take care of today. Things didn't quite go as planned on their last trip, and they didn't quite get everything done to the Mustang that they wanted to get done. And before they left, they barely got the front suspension put back together, but didn't have any time to get it aligned. So the day after they left for California, I made a call to Lucore Automotive to schedule the Mustang in for an alignment. That way we can find out if there's any parts or pieces we need now before they come back from California. So anyway, I run over to Billy's house, pick up his truck and trailer, and then head to Billy's shop, load up the Mustang, tie it down, close up the shop, and then I start headed towards Columbus. Lucore is up near Muirfield Village, near Marysville, just northwest of downtown. So it's about a 45-minute trek from Billy's shop up to Lucore, give or take a few minutes for construction. But I feel it's well worth the drive to deal with hardcore enthusiasts that enjoy hot rodding, cruising, and race cars as much as we do. And they've always done a fantastic job for us with whatever we bring in. So today our main goal is to get this Mustang aligned out so that it's drivable for Tony and Tess when they get back, so they can start putting the finishing touches on the suspension tune-up to get this car dialed in exactly how they want it. I bet you just love seeing me come in here.
Yeah. Most of the time.
Most of the time.
I did unfortunately watch your video from this morning, which apparently there's maybe a noise from the back of the Falcon.
Oh yeah, we don't want to talk about that yet.
Yeah, that's a fluid issue. We'll just deal with that another day.
So Rich and Austin get us all set up on their Hunter alignment rack and see just how far out of whack this Mustang is. Literally every nut and bolt in the suspension of this car has been moved or changed since they bought it. So Rich made a few adjustments to the rear suspension and then got started on the front just about the time it was time to go to lunch. So we decided to take one of the finest automobiles they have to offer as a company car up to City Barbecue. Austin's 1970 Pontiac Le Mans is a little rough around the edges. It's your typical hot rod. It has sketchy brakes, but 467 cubic inches of Pontiac V8 under the hood to make sure we can get where we need to go, as long as we've got enough gas money and enough distance to get stopped. Luckily, we didn't have any problems with that getting to City Barbecue, but after lunch we ran into another problem. The tie rods need to have some spacers installed in between the spindles to make sure that the bump steer kit works properly. So Austin and I took a little trip up to the Jegs main warehouse in the Le Mans to pick up these bushings that we need for the bump steer kit and brought them back to Rich. What do you think, Richard?
I think it's a lot better when it came in.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably is.
So the tow out on lift is a lot better. We started out at over 6 and over 6 degrees tow out on turns, and then now we're down to just under 2 degrees tow out on lift, which is a lot better. It's not perfect, but we're a lot closer. There's a couple tricks we can do with rack bushings and maybe longer bolts and more shims to get it right where we want it to be. But it's already substantially better than it was. Camber's at 0 toe, static. That actually goes positive on lift, but that's the suspension design.
Yeah.
We may try going with a negative static so that when it lifts, it's kind of a balance in between,
right, between
where
the
it needs
two.
to be, but we need to figure out what the best setup is. We're going to start with this as a baseline and then try a few different setups, and we'll go from there.
It's par for the course with long travel front suspension.
Well, and we got to learn how we want them set up to be the best for what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think this is a good starting point. I think we're probably going to end up at like a negative ½ degree camber for static, and then when it's running down the road, it'll be closer to 0 on camber. But we'll see what the driver gives us for feedback, and we'll try a few different setups, and that's part of the learning curve. So.
All right. So the Mustang situation took up most of my Tuesday, but by Wednesday it's time to get back on my own projects. Well, look who it is.
Yep.
Are you ready to do some race car hackery today?
Which race car hackery?
The Malibu.
What's wrong with it now?
You'll see. If you watched my last video, you noticed that I took the Malibu down to Edgewater and turned the nitrous loose on it right out of the hole. Now, even though it was on a fairly soft ramp for 150 shot of nitrous, it was still doing a pretty heavy G-body shuffle. So I ordered in a Team Z anti-roll bar kit to install in the back of the Malibu to replace the old UMI kit that was on the original rear end. So, it's time to dig in. And Jeremy digs in literally into this box. Now, Kenny and Harley had been here yesterday while I was gone working on the Mustang, and they cleaned the shop all up. It was looking really nice until Jeremy comes in this morning and starts unpackaging this Team Z anti-roll bar kit. So I'm going to have to make sure I clean up after Jeremy, because if Harley comes in and sees this mess in her work area, she may try to attempt murder. And I may be okay with that, honestly.
Fat guy in a little truck. It's a fat guy in a little truck. You look like Jeff Harley.
Open the damn door. I think Jeremy got Jeff Foxworthy and Chris Farley mixed up. But I have no answer for a fat guy in a little truck. He's got me there. Anyway, I go ahead and back Billy's S10 out of the shop so we can bring the Malibu in and get started on putting this anti-roll bar kit up underneath the back of it. Kenny showed up just in time to help us put this thing in, and Harley's here today doing shipping. While Jeremy gets started fitting this thing up underneath the back of the car, Kenny and I started rounding up clean alcohol drums to have filled for the weekend. Jeremy taped up the shock shafts on my Viking dual adjustable shocks to make sure that none of the sparks or weld splatter damages the seals or the shock shaft. Then it was time to start cleaning up the frame and taking measurements to precisely fit the mounting tube between the two frame rails. The mounting tube has to be precisely fit to the back of the car, or else there would be clearance issues between the shocks, the trunk floor, the fuel tank, and the coil springs. So initially, Jeremy just tack welds everything in place. That way, once everything's assembled and we check suspension travel, if we need to move anything or make any changes, it'll be much easier to cut things back out and redo them. And given how tight the fitment is of everything in the back of this car, there's a high probability that this will have to be done 2 or 3 different times before we get everything just right. At this point, it's time to set the Malibu back down on the ground, have me sit in the car, and check fitment and suspension travel to make sure everything's going to work okay without binding up or without the shocks actually hitting the mounting tube, which we had problems with initially. So Jeremy cut the tack welds back off the mounting tube, repositioned it, and then he and Kenny finished up welding and painting the linkage arms. All right, is it done?
Yeah.
100%.
Yep.
Krylon Kenny put his special touch to it too?
Yeah, and then I scratched it.
Oh, well, that figures. No, that looks pretty good, really.
It's not bad considering it took us 4 hours.
4 hours?
5 hours.
It took you longer than that.
Shit, I had to go up to the farm, fix Dad's mower, fix the
Oh,
GP,
God,
fucking
here we
load
go.
tools up, bring them back up here,
Here we go with the excuses.
and then throw your kit of shit together.
Kit of shit. It's a Team Z anti-roll bar kit. That's far from a kit of shit.
Oh, I'll notify Zorro.
Jesus Christ. So can we put this thing down? Let me take it for a test drive now, or what?
Yeah, go break it.
No, I'm not going to break it. I better not break it. If I break it, that's your fault.
I didn't build the kit. It didn't even come with instructions. No,
You need
nothing.
instructions for that?
No, nothing.
Good Lord. Well, let's wipe that rear end housing down real quick before we set it down, at least clean this thing up. This is what we call maintenance, Jeremy.
No.
We maintain our race car equipment in a certain fashion to keep everything clean and looking nice.
You want to say that again? You maintain keeping clean.
You missed a spot. Once we got done cleaning up the rear end housing and going over all the nuts and bolts one last time, it was time to back the Malibu out of the shop, let it warm up for a few minutes, and then take it up the road for its first test drive with this new Team Z anti-roll bar kit. Right off the bat, I took the Malibu down the roughest road near our house to check suspension travel and make sure that the suspension isn't binding up. Everything seems pretty good with the anti-roll bar, so now maybe we can start getting this carburetor dialed in better so that I can take it to Trails Friday night for their Friday night test and tune session. But for right now, I'm going to head back to the house and gather up all my air bleed assortments and nitrous jet assortments so I can start tuning on this thing tomorrow.
Well, hi, June. Well,
Better.
it's better?
Much better.
Uh-huh. Is it cured of its twistiness?
Yeah, the G-body shuffle I think is gone.
Cured.
Yeah. So now I get to start tuning on the carburetor.
All right.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the shop. And I took some time tonight to go ahead and have dinner and watch TV a little bit with Vicky and Billy, watch some television program that they like to watch. And so I'm out here a little bit late tonight. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning right now. And it's a little bit too late to be pulling in and out of here with the Malibu and testing and tuning. I'm not going to do that tonight to my neighbors. So tomorrow, I'm going to start trying to tune the carburetor in a little bit better. When I was at Edgewater last weekend, the air-fuel ratio at wide open throttle was 12.5. And it was also 12.5 the other day when Billy and I took it up the road. And that's just a little bit on the rich side. It's not terrible, but it's just a little bit on the rich side. 12.5 to 12.7 is where I would like to see it. And it's at 12.5. So I'm not too worried about the jetting as far as wide open throttle. I might go down maybe one jet size in the front. And that's strictly just due to the fact that it's a little bit rich at part throttle cruise. Like just barely tipping the throttle blades in, it gets really, really rich. And that's not necessarily the jet, but a slight jet change can have a tiny effect on that. Tomorrow, I plan on switching out the low-speed air bleeds. Those are the outside corner air bleeds if you're looking down on the top of the carburetor. And I'm going to try and switch those out tomorrow. And the larger the air bleed is, the more air the air bleed allows to get down into the main body. And effectively, that will help lean out the air-fuel mixture either on the low side or the high side. The high side I'm not worried about. The high side seems to be perfectly fine. I'm strictly concerned with part throttle, just barely tip the throttle blades open. So that's a low-speed air bleed adjustment, I think, is what's going to cure that. We're going to try and work on that tomorrow. That has a direct effect on fuel economy because on this car, when you lock the converter in overdrive at, say, 55 miles an hour, the RPM reads about 1900 RPM. So you're just barely laying your foot on the throttle, and it should do really well on fuel, but it doesn't really. I think the first week that I put the E85 carburetor on this car, I did a fuel economy test on it, and it got about 12.5 miles to the gallon on the interstate at about 70 miles an hour. That's not bad for an E85 carburetor, but it's not especially good either. And unfortunately, you know, I wasn't really tuning the car for economy. I was more or less trying to get it to go fast, and I really wasn't too worried about it. But with some of the events that we've got coming up maybe next year, I would really, really like to be able to cruise this car long distance, and fuel economy is definitely going to become an issue because the E85 stations are few and far between sometimes, and you've got to be able to make it from one to the next. And so I'm very interested to see exactly how many miles per gallon I can pull out of this thing. But I'm also very interested in making a 10-second pass in it this weekend maybe. So I know that there's a couple different test and tune sessions. I've done some research tonight, and it looks like Trails' test and tune right down the road here is going to be 8th mile only. Bummer. And that's due to, I think, the glue shortage. But they're going to be racing this weekend, all weekend, 8th mile. And the Test and Tune Friday night is also going to be 8th mile. So the 8th mile time that I'm looking for is 6:97, 6:95, somewhere in that area. That is equivalent to 10:90 something in the quarter. I have not been close to that yet. I think I didn't want to guess. I went ahead and dug the time slip out. The personal best pass on this car to date was at Edgewater last weekend. It went 11:28 with a 3 1/4 and went 7:11 at 94.54 in the 8th. So that pass was decent. It went a 150 60 foot. The fastest 60 foot this car has ever made was a 149. That was with an anti-roll bar on the back, on the 7.5 inch rear end. And I basically just grabbed the nitrous right off the hit on the button. No progression, no ramp, no nothing. So I know that the car is capable, definitely capable of going in the 140 60 foots. And if you take 500ths off a 60 foot, knock, a 10th off the 8th mile, you're down at 7:01. And I think with some shock changes and a little bit of suspension and tire air pressure tuning, I think I can get the car down in there into that 690 range in the 8th. If things line up, if the stars all line up, tomorrow night there is a Test and Tune at Edgewater that will be quarter mile. I don't know if I want to take the car all the way back down to Cincinnati or not tomorrow. I'll know more tomorrow as things progress, because there's been some changes in plans for the weekend. They seem to be changing minute by minute, and that happens around here sometimes. But we may not be going to Magnolia this weekend. We may be going someplace else. Or the kids may go one place and I may go another. I'm not sure yet what's going on. I'm in a holding pattern at the moment to see how things shake out. So I don't want to make any promises yet. But if all else fails, I may, tomorrow, depending on how things go, with tuning the carburetor, I may load this thing on a trailer and take it down to Edgewater and shake it down tomorrow night, quarter mile. Because although you can take an 8th mile time and say, well, it would go 1090, that's not a time slip. That's not proof that the car goes 10s, and that's what I want. I'm sure that's what everybody else wants. They don't want to see, well, it went this in the 8th, that means it'll go quarter. That's not going to fly with me, and it's probably not going to fly with too many people that watch this channel. So we'll see how things go tomorrow. I still want to I've either got to take some fuel away from the nitrous plate, or I've got to add a little bit of nitrous. The 67 jet, according to the Nitrous Express jet chart, is for 150 horsepower. That's what it's rated for, 150 horsepower. And that's what's in the plate right now, a 67 jet. It currently has a 48 jet in the fuel. And last weekend, during my testing, trying to sort out what was going on with the car, I borrowed a 42 jet off of another racer and put a 42 jet in it. And it felt faster. It 60-footed faster, but it caused the ignition issue to get much worse. So I know that it'll make it pass with a 42 jet in it. However, that is much less fuel than what the nitrous chart tells you to use. And I'm also running lower fuel pressure. So that's considerably leaner than what the nitrous jet chart calls for. But as it says on the bottom of the chart, that's for informational purposes only. That's for starting. That's a baseline. It's going to be safe. And if you want all of it, if you want all the power out of it, you're going to have to do a little digging. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. I've dug out my old nitrous jet assortments. John Molina gave me a set a long time ago. God love him. He built the nitrous kit, the Fogger, for Tommy's S10 years ago. So I already looked through it. I've got a 42 jet in there, so I already know where I can go. I can go from a 48 to a 42 on the fuel side, and I've got that jet here with me. So we'll see what happens. Tomorrow is going to be a tuning day for the Malibu. I want to try and get this tip-in part throttle rich condition taken care of. I might go ahead and put it on the interstate, go do my fuel economy test again and just see what improvements I've made. And then we'll start tuning on the nitrous kit. We'll see what happens. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you all tomorrow. Good night, guys.